Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Settify sessions using legal tech to personalise the law. So I'm Amanda Kerdel. I'm from Settify, also a family lawyer. And with me, I have Andrew and Karen. So thank you for joining us, both of you. Now, just a brief background about both Andrew and Karen. Andrew has practiced exclusively in family law since 2005. In 2013, Andrew became an accredited family law specialist, and prior to joining the team at Tyne McCartney as special counsel, Andrew worked at Hopgood Gannon and Best Wilson Buckley as well. And is also a nationally accredited mediator and a member of the Australian Institute of Family Law Arbitrators and Mediators. So very impressive, Andrew, and thank you for joining us. Karen has over 18 years of litigation experience as a solicitor in the area of wills, estates, trusts, and equity. A lot of you that may be joining us may have seen her recently at the STEP conference. Was it, Karen, that you attended? Yes, we saw pictures of that too. She's one of a handful of barristers who is a Queensland Law Society accredited specialist in succession law as well. And Karen has been ranked in the Doyle's Guide as preeminent in the category of wills and estate litigation lawyers and recommended in wills, estate and succession planning lawyers in 2020 and 2021 respectively. So very great panelists to have, obviously very knowledgeable in your areas. Just before we get straight into it, if you do have any questions, feel free to pop it in the chat section. And if we have time towards the end, Andrew and Karen can definitely respond to some questions, and hopefully I can too. So what we're really talking about today, and for those that are joining us, you're obviously interested in potentially introducing tech into your company and are concerned about the personal element of it, which as a family lawyer myself, that is one of the biggest concerns. So what we're going to cover today is the barriers faced by clients and how to remove them, how to remove the fear of the unknown, the best ways to educate clients about the legal process, and also how legal tech actually prepares lawyers and clients for their first initial meeting. So let's get started with the barriers faced by clients and how to remove them. One of the things that one of the big barriers is actually for clients to find time to come into the office. A lot of family law clients just want to do things online, and they like the option of being able to do things online, whether that be family law or whether that be wills and estates. Andrew and Karen, in your experience, maybe I'll start with you, Andrew. What do you find in terms of how legal tech can actually help with that?
Well, one of the things that definitely helped when I practiced in a rural regional area was the ability for clients to use legal tech at any time, really. They might have times where they're working, so they can use their downtime and use legal tech. And given that in a rural or regional setting, you might be some distance from where your solicitor might be, and being able to use Settify to get information to begin with allows you to, as a solicitor, to have that information, look at it, and then start to be able to tailor an approach for a client, because it might well be an 8 or 9 hour round trip for a client to come and see me. They might also need to line that up with other appointments that they have. So time is of the essence. And if they can use legal technology to assist with that, it has been able to cut down that element there and start to get a more personalised approach for them.
I think definitely legal tech, at least in the context that Andrew's talking about, certainly has the ability to overcome the tyranny of distance. So notwithstanding the fact that someone might be located quite a long way away from you, legal tech, whether it be something like Settify or whether it be good old Zoom call like we're on now, has the ability to make access to lawyers, a lot easier. Even when you're dealing with people in small towns, and both Andrew and I have had occasion over our careers to deal with people from regional centres, there are times when you don't want to see a lawyer in the town that you are from for all sorts of reasons. You might not be able to. There might be conflict issues. There might only be a handful of people who can assist you in town, and they might all be involved already in whatever dispute is ongoing. So the ability to use legal tech to talk to someone in the next biggest centre is a huge boon.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. I mean, for me personally, I don't live in a rural area, but I will always choose an online option regardless. And I can't imagine what it would be like for rural clients that don't have many options at all, don't really have the time. I mean, 8 to 9 hours, geez, that's significant. So having that option is definitely something that is really valuable to those types of clients as well. Now, I don't know if this was an issue for either of you as well, but when I was practicing, initial meetings themselves this is one of the barriers, can actually be quite confronting for your clients in the first instance, because in family law, for instance, often clients are quite emotional, they're fragile, and it's, you're meeting a lawyer for the first time, so it's a lot. And it's the same for wills and estates, like making a will, doing an enduring power of attorney, guardianship. It's a really confronting exercise. Do you find that having a system in place whereby you have knowledge of, all the information is basically in front of you, that the client does feel less confronted, and it's more of a beneficial experience for the client?
I certainly think so. I mean, I think we've all gone into a meeting with absolutely no information other than a slip of paper with the client's name, a vague idea, it's a family law consult or it's a wills and estates consult, and maybe a phone number. We've all done that. And imagine how you feel as a lawyer doing that, which is like, wonder what this will bring. Imagine that magnified 100-fold with a client who has no subject matter knowledge about whatever it is they're coming to see you about, and they're already really, I suppose, at a high stress level and a high uncertainty level. So to have something more than that to go on when you go into a meeting from a lawyer's perspective is very useful. But from a client's point of view, it just puts them a little bit at ease. There might be some information that they're given as a part of that induction process, but also for them, just the idea that, okay, this is the information that's relevant. Have I even prepared? Have I brought with me the material that the lawyer is going to think is relevant? Even that is a huge start in the right direction. And certainly for estate planning matters, which is probably the area that I've interfaced most with Settify, the whole issue is about gathering the right information. And if you can start with the right information instead of having to sort of collect it along the way, that is certainly something that adds to the efficiency of the whole process.
Yeah. And also just, the feedback we get from clients that do engage Settify is exactly what you've said, Karen, and that is that they do feel much more prepared. They feel confident and they feel empowered coming into that initial meeting. And I always describe it as a pre-reading. If you don't do your pre-reading before law school and you go to a lecture, you have no idea what's going on. But if you do the pre-reading, then you just, you can totally understand what's going on. I should have actually mentioned this in the beginning, but for those of you that do not know what Settify is, you're probably just kind of, what's going on? But Settify essentially is an AI-powered platform, and our platforms are family law, wills and estates, probate and estate disputes. And these platforms allow clients to start their matters at any time of the day and convert to fee-paying clients as well. But at the end of it, the clients are taken. So in the beginning, the clients are taken through a handheld journey, and at the end of it, the lawyers are provided with really detailed information about their matter as well. So sorry for not mentioning that before.
I think the other thing that's really important to acknowledge about that introduction is that Settify really isn't trying to take the place of a lawyer. So this is about gathering information in a sensitive and sensible kind of way.
Yeah.
What it does do, and again, I'm speaking from the perspective of me having identified that I mostly work in that wills and estates area. What the report, when it comes to me, shows is the basic information, the stuff that the client has no difficulty with whatsoever, people's full names and addresses. But it might indicate, and in fact, you're encouraged to indicate when you fill out the form as a client, that there are certain areas you want to talk some more about. So you might not, one of the biggest sticking issues, I feel like, can I get an amen when I say this? Who's going to be the guardian and who's, of infant children, and who's going to be an executor. So they're often things that people get stuck on. They know what they want to do in terms of the gifts in their will, but those roles can be difficult, and they're often the areas they want to talk to someone about. They want to have the benefit of their experience, and they really want to understand what's involved in the role so they can consider their support people and work out which of those people might best fill those roles. And the report will actually indicate that. And you can then spend your time giving value where the client really wants the value, which is in those little areas that's a problem. So yeah. I find that useful.
Oh, and Andrew, you just logged off, I think, and now
he dropped out, and I just sent him the link to a different.
Oh, great.
We had some tech issues, but we're back on board, and you didn't even notice until he logged back on.
I know. It looks like, Andrew, you've taken a quick flight somewhere else, have you there?
There's some sorghum behind you, my friend.
Can you hear us, Andrew?
I think he's busy connecting.
That's all right. I'm glad he's joined us again.
Absolutely.
All right. So another barrier as well is definitely the back and forth. So in family law, and especially in wills and estates, Karen, like just going back and forth in terms of getting client documents, speaking to financial planners, speaking to accountants, getting a real mud map of all of their, company structures, entities, and things like that. Again, do you find that that barrier is a bit more removed when you do have things like, because our wills and estate system, for instance, you're provided with a family tree, you're provided with, the client's provided with what documents the client needs to bring into their initial meeting. They're also given food for thought as well. Do you find that all that information prior to meeting with the client as well, it reduces that back and forth between?
Yeah, it definitely does reduce the back and forth. And I think, as I said, these are the information that's required if you don't have any of that to begin with, is oftentimes things that the client does not even realise might be something that is required. So you're already off to a good start if the client's bought something that they otherwise wouldn't have thought that they required, and which was, you weren't going to, then at the end of that first meeting, you weren't going to have the full picture, and the client was going to go away with homework, basically, before you could get to the point that you needed to really be starting at. So I think the thing about Settify, at least from an estate planning point of view, what it really does is gives you the ability to start off a bigger base of information. So usually the first meeting was a real fact find in terms of documents and, what does the client want to achieve, goals, all of those things were really what the first meeting was all about. And what Settify does is helps reduce that load and take it away from the first meeting. So it's sort of pre that first meeting, so that that first meeting is happening in a much better informed context.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like Andrew has joined us yet.
Let me see. I'll send him a text and see.
Thank you. Sorry, everyone joining. We are having a few technical difficulties. I sound a bit like a pilot. So
hopefully it's not any turbulence. That would be unpleasant and a bit seasick.
So only really so Andrew can comment on the family law.
Oops, he's dropped out again. Oh dear.
Right.
Well, I suppose the only thing that I can comment on in terms of the family law process, and this might even be moving on slightly to the next topic that I know we want to talk about, but it's this idea that it's more so, I think, than estate planning. Usually the family law fact find is happening in the context of an ongoing dispute where people are already feeling really uncertain and sort of in some respects paralyzed by being unsure about what's going to happen to them next. And, you know, there's that fear of getting advice because it's the fear of the unknown. So the great part about, you know, in terms of removing that barrier is that there is some clarity given to the client very early on about the paths that are available to them. You know, again, straying into our next topic, but introducing them to terms that they might not have heard and some differences, things that they need to think about and information that the lawyer needs in order to give them more specific advice tailored to their circumstances. So in that sense, I think it's important to acknowledge the role that Settify plays in sort of reducing the barrier that arises from a lack of knowledge about what can happen next and how that can stop people from reaching out. You know, it's confronting for people to pick up the phone and ring a lawyer and make an appointment. That might not have been the case, you know, a decade or so ago, but with the rise of tech and certainly following COVID, it's much harder for people to do that. They're much more used. I think you said it earlier. If there's not an online option, then it's kind of hard for you to engage with that process. Whereas I'm not sure that that's necessarily the same for a lot of the older demographics.
Yeah, and on that point as well, you also want to maintain that personal element of it, and it's really hard to do that with, you know, things online potentially. But so I know, for instance, with Settify, we have something called our invite function, which is, you know, so what happens is a client will call up or you'll get a referral, and all you need to do is plug in the client's name and email address into the system.
Yes.
The email gets sent to the client, potential client, and it's a really nice personal touch. It has a picture of the lawyer, it has a bio, it says, click here to get started. We're looking forward to meeting you. But something like that in this environment is actually really beneficial, and clients actually really appreciate it. So from that, we actually have a really high conversion rate of potential clients to fee paying clients as well. So that on that point, that's certainly
your experience.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest interface with the entire Settify process, was providing the link to someone. So it's the kind of thing that when someone phones, we would usually give them the link so that they could at least see what it was all about. And if they chose not to use it, that's fine too. That, you know, they're welcome to come and do it the same way people have been giving instructions to solicitors for years, which is come in and sit across a desk and talk to us. However, we had a really high conversion rate, you know, when I was back in solicitor land, in terms of when we sent people the link. And, you know, that does a whole lot of other great things, you know, in terms of fostering at least some information for a person before they are coming in to see them, if they're a bit uncertain or if they're a bit unsure, or frankly, they're just feeling a bit beaten up by the entire process that they've been through to this point, which is usually the case in family law matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. Andrew, can you hear us? And
I can now.
back online. Okay.
Stop talking about family law.
I've just popped about 2.5 hours west to Dolby, and I'm sitting in the middle of a sorghum field.
I was right. It is sorghum.
You must be boiling. Are you all right?
That's right. Darling Downs is quite cool.
Okay. Oh, good. Great. I really got to figure out how to change my background so I can hang out with you, Andrew. So I think we've covered the barriers faced by clients in terms of, you know, rural clients going back and forth, you know, still maintaining that personal element in that initial meeting. We've also covered, you know, access as well. So on that, is there anything else, Andrew, you might want to add? Because I know you cut out for a little bit. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next point. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that, Andrew? You're happy to move on? Great. All right. And like I said, again, if there are any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat section. All right. Now, The next point we are talking about is going to be the best ways to educate clients about the legal process. Now, this is huge for most lawyers, and this is a really passionate point for me, because I feel like when clients understand what the legal process is, that initial meeting with the client is so much better, and you're actually having a really nice conversation with the client where you're getting to know them, and you actually have room to do your job, which is give legal advice. So in terms of, and I know, so at Settify we gathered data from several family law clients, a huge data set actually that came through that use Settify as family law clients, and we aligned different priorities. And so the clients had to choose which priority they thought was the most important. And the most important is understanding the legal process. So Andrew, I'll get you to start on this point. Education, obviously a huge point for you. And do you find that when clients have used Settify, that initial meeting with the client is just, they know what's going on?
Yeah, definitely. One of the good things about Settify is that when you roll Settify out, you have the ability to go in and edit the scripting that's used, and that can make it specific to various things that you want to get across to your clients who are coming to you. It might be partly how your practice works, in terms of you might prefer not to do a lot of litigious work and you prefer to do collaborative work, so you want to educate clients about that process. But it also allows you to provide that education to the client about all these terms that they're going to hear, terms of art that we use and take for granted all the time that some clients might not be familiar with. One of the things also that Settify is great for in terms of educating the clients is that we can tailor it to the specific jurisdiction that we're in. So even though I'm based in Queensland, family law, being a federal jurisdiction, has some elements that are the same, but we have other allied areas. So for instance, domestic violence or wills and estate issues that we also see. They're state-based legislation. So we're able to tailor that advice to a client, be it, I have clients in Western Australia, I have clients in New South Wales, Queensland, overseas. Part of educating them is also making sure that we get terms right, because whilst we call it a DVO in Queensland, it's a VRO in Western Australia. Those terms are different, so we can provide an explanation to them in a way that is easy for them to understand and is paced at their own pace. We can provide information that we normally would provide anyway, so things like limitation dates, prompt them about things that they might not have thought about. So one of the things that I find clients don't always provide information about is non-financial contributions or gifts or inheritances, things like that. That information is vital for me to provide advice. So if they can step through this process, and rather than extracting this information out, when they follow through the Settify process, they're getting that information and it's acting as a prompt to them to provide that information, which means that we can use our first meeting effectively.
And I think it's also useful because it gives people a bit of a mud map and pops them on a particular pathway. So, if you're dealing with a property dispute where there are no children, or certainly no children that are under the age of 18, then Settify very quickly recognises that, and you're on a slightly different pathway in terms of the information that's being sought and the information that's then, of course, being provided to the client. And so, the previous sources of information might have been your auntie's best friend's neighbour in terms of, oh, this is what happened in my XYZ family law dispute. So, you know, or might be my estate a planning appointment. This is what happened. And the best part about this, though, is it is actually tailored to the client's specific circumstances. And it's giving them a bit of a mud map about where they sit in the overall landscape of family law, which is big, it's complex, and it's quite specialised in places. So at least it takes away the things that aren't relevant and leaves them just with the things that they need to have some background understanding of. So they get a little bit of a bigger picture understanding of where they sit.
Yeah.
And the problem too with an initial meeting is that it's information overload. I might see a client for an hour and a half on a first consultation, and all this stuff is just spinning in their head. So one of the things that does help is that they have some knowledge of it first, but it also means that as we go through the process, we can pick up those areas where we might need to provide certain advice. And certainly what we have done in the past and what I'm doing at the moment is providing particular links to clients to resources on our website that once they've gone through the process, they book their appointment. If they want to find out something a little bit more specific, in the email that goes out to them, we provide links to some of our electronic guides that we have on our website. And that allows someone to sit back at their leisure, read that information, think about what information they provided during the Settify interview, and then they might go, oh, hang on a second, I've got that completely around the wrong way. I've got to fix that now. And so they can provide that information at their leisure.
Yeah, and just on that point as well, I also think that legal terminology as well, like for the lay person, they would have no idea, for example, wills and estates, you'd have no idea what an executor is or a power of attorney, like what is an attorney. So Settify, what we have on basically every page, for example, on the wills and estate system is wherever a client is ever a bit unsure. So if they don't know what an executor is or an attorney is, the system will actually explain it to them, which, most lawyers would have to do anyway in their initial meeting, but just understanding that is huge. And also just Andrew, you mentioned non-financial contributions as well. Some people, some clients don't know that that's a thing, so introducing them to that as well. And certainly talking about headspace, certainly for domestic violence victims as well, when I had my initial meetings, they never took anything out of it because obviously you're in a really, like, your headspace is all over, you can't think straight, you're in a constant state of anxiety. So being introduced to these things before that meeting, those types of clients are able to gather a lot more and remember a lot more too. So certainly those are really good points being raised. Do you find also that, working in the bigger firms, both of you have, that when using Settify, you're also able to, since we're on the topic of education, if a junior lawyer were to take on a matter or a senior lawyer were to take on a matter, that you don't have to mentor junior lawyers as much because the Settify system allows for asking all the questions that need to be asked in really that initial meeting. Do you find that?
I think that certainly assists. I mean, Settify doesn't pretend to replace that input from a lawyer, but it certainly gives you some more confidence that all the questions have been asked. They might not all have been answered, but they've at least all been asked, and there's a report that lands on someone's desk, whether it's yours as a supervising partner or lawyer, or you're the junior lawyer and you're wanting to take your, I suppose, practice to the next level. And the way you're going to do that is because client interviewing is really hard. For my sins, I happen to sit on the accredited specialist board for my subject area here in Queensland, and it's one of the hardest areas. It's hard to learn. You really have to see it modelled. The difficulty with that is it's really costly to see it modelled. And the best part about Settify, though, is it gives you the roadmap if you're a junior practitioner in terms of the information that's been asked and the areas that need to be explored further. And just that process, the going through of that process, certainly I think aids in directing junior practitioners to the questions that they need to be thinking about before they end up in a meeting. You know, I think I said it at the beginning, we've all been into a meeting where the only thing we know is that the client's name, and you know that's all you've got when you walk into the meeting. You might know it's a family law consult, you might know it's a succession law consult, and after that it's just, hi, how you going, how can I help? Anything that's an improvement on that, anything that gives you a better clue, means that the appointment that you have is going to be so much more effective, because you've got some information to begin with. And the junior lawyer who wants to take their skills to the next level and knows that tomorrow they've got a consult that's about some complicated aspect of estate planning, or perhaps the client has a interesting take on what they want to do in their enduring power of attorney. Well, that's a really good opportunity just to spend half an hour brushing up on what you know is going to be something that's going to come up in that meeting, so you're best prepared for it. So I think that is really useful for sure.
And it can also assist too in terms of the management of files, where you might have a junior practitioner who wants a second opinion from someone else who is more senior, or from someone who in the firm is a specialist in a particular subject area. So one of the things that always used to happen where I have been involved is child support is one of my nerdy areas that I really like to look at. So if someone has a child support issue, they can send me part of Settify and I can step through with them. Or if they just want a second opinion about the situation, they've got a particular view, but they're not sure about it, or there's a novel area, you can provide the report to someone else. All the information is there. Or if it's not there, you can then go back and say, right, you've got to get this particular subset of information before we can give a particular... take it further and give a particular advice on an area where there could be something novel, there could be something complicated, and that way it actually helps you to manage your junior practitioners, because if they're struggling to understand something, well, you're not going to be able to do it because there's no data there. You've got to get that data, and so you know where things are deficient.
I think that's right. And it does also, you know, as a person who used to run a group for her sins, it gives you the ability to stream work to the most appropriate person. So if you know you've got something that looks relatively straightforward, then you know that with some confidence you can allocate that to a more junior staff member. If you've got something that has every red flag known to man, or some really, what you know to be some really difficult or tricky areas, you can allocate to someone who's more senior and maybe have the junior person sit in. So certainly that was invaluable to us when we were sort of allocating work. I think from a wills and estates perspective, the other thing that we also found really useful was the ability to look at what the client was telling us about what their estate planning job was likely to be. And I think we're all familiar with the person who says, oh, I just need a really simple ... estate plan. And I can't remember the last time I saw a simple estate anything. It was a very long time ago. So the client's idea of simple and our idea of simple are vastly divergent. But what it used to really help us to be able to do is a client wants an indication of cost before they proceed. And the thing about estate planning jobs usually is they tend to be quite quick turnover compared to, say, a family law job, which might go on for months, hopefully not years. But, you know, a good estate planning job should be moving through the system in a matter of weeks rather than months or years. But if you have to invest a lot of time and energy into working out whether the client even wants to proceed with the estate plan because price is important to them, the thing that this enabled usually us to do was to give them a pretty reasonable estimate of what we thought the fees for what they needed actually were. So your input as the lawyer or the law firm was quite small. You're basically reading the Settify report. You haven't had to sit down and invest an hour or two of your time to extract that information, only to discover that the client, although they've heard all your recommendations, just can't afford it or doesn't want to proceed with it for some reason. The best part about that Settify report is it gave you the ability to give that estimate relatively accurately, at least a range, and then the client could decide whether they wanted to proceed or not, which we found was invaluable for managing our flow of work too.
And also in terms of managing that flow of work, one of the things that they're currently working on is using the data that comes from Settify in the various forms. So there's an XML file that we get as part of the process. So we're currently working on our XML pull through. So it takes that information from the Settify file into our document management system and starts to pre-populate a lot of the information that we need for our precedents, even our engagement correspondence, sending out client agreements, being able to tailor the estimates as well. That information gets pulled. We can work on pulling that information through. So it allows you to be more focused in terms of efficiency and focus on the client rather than on sitting down and data and all that sort of stuff.
And just quickly on that topic, we didn't touch it in the previous point, but what are your thoughts about what we describe as clients paying for a scribe? I know that when I was practicing, there were a couple of clients that did come through that were quite narky about, a lawyer just basically taking down factual information that they should have gathered beforehand. Have you both ever experienced that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a real chicken and egg scenario. You can't give the advice unless you have the information. So I think there is an understanding from a client that you need a certain base amount of information to work on. You can't give advice in a vacuum. The difficulty and where that becomes a problem for clients is where their affairs are really complicated or their history in a family law matter spans a really long period of time, and you actually need to go into it, and it takes a long time to get that information before they even get to the point where they've had any advice or had any advice that they can really rely on. They might have had some general advice that they can or they can't do something, or it should be looked into further. But in terms of, should I really do this or should I not? That can be a real problem for people, and that's when things start to get problematic. So the fact is people's affairs are getting more complicated. The lights have gone out in Andrew's
so distracted.
He needs to move.
What are you doing, Andrew?
Apparently wobbling my head doesn't do it.
If you're still for too long, the lights turn off. It's one of those buildings.
Oh, no.
So
apparently we're trying to be energy efficient.
Which what we do encourage, being energy efficient. Yeah,
absolutely. But coming back to what I was saying, yeah. I think the real issue is when the clients feel that balance isn't right. And I suppose, they don't appreciate that, you need something more than their name, their date of birth, and their kids' names and dates of birth in order to be able to give them advice that's meaningful. Now, a lot of people can understand that you need an amount of information, but when it starts to get ridiculous in terms of the detail you need to be able to express a view or to give advice, that's when there tends to be problems. And of course, the best part about Settify is nearly all of the stuff that the client can provide very simply and off the top of their head is just not a question you have to ask them. Their full name, their address, their date of birth, their spouse's details, their kids' details, basic information about the relationship, all of that stuff, the easy stuff for the client, but the stuff that's really, really important for the lawyer to understand and actually get right, it's all taken care of before the client steps into your office.
Look, some clients don't understand that when they have this interview with you for the first time, they're not sure about what it's costing them in terms of, you might have a set initial attendance fee or something like that. But when some clients come in and they see, well, hang on, there's 2 people in the room, I mean, how much is this costing me per minute?
To get focused on that instead of on the advice.
Yeah, and the advice and the information. And so sometimes it can be a great thing to train junior lawyers to have them in with you, but also there are some times where the efficiency of having that information first allows you to give that more personalised approach. And, it allows you to sit there and say, look, this is how we charge. This is how things happen. This is what a cost disclosure is. Explain that information, and that helps calm people down because they're in a situation where they really have not a lot of clue about what's going to happen in terms of cost when they first walk in the door.
And I think also knowing what's relevant and what isn't is really hard for a client who doesn't have any experience or any interface with law or lawyers. And particularly if all they're going on is auntie's best friend's niece or nephew and their experience. I mean, those kinds of comparisons are highly individualized, and I don't have to tell anybody who's on this particular Zoom call what, that's just not going to be in any way useful. Just by virtue of the questions that they are asked through that Settify process, they will understand, at least in part, or have a better understanding about what information is actually relevant. And even if they don't understand why, I have a bit of a habit of saying to clients, now listen, I'm going to have to ask you a handful of random questions, but I promise I'll explain at the end why I'm asking them and how that relates to your matter. I think if you trust that Settify process, as a client, you're being asked a handful of seemingly at times random questions, but they do actually, you're actually being asked them for a purpose. And if you don't know the answer off the top of your head and you have to zip off and consult, material in your tax or financial affairs files, then you can do that. And imagine if you were trying to do that while you're sitting in front of a lawyer. Even if you were technically savvy and have all of that stuff, saved somewhere in the cloud, it's going to really mean that the appointment you have is very stop-start. It's going to be you ducking off to check information, or it's the lawyer making the big long list at the end of all the homework that the client has to do before the lawyer can give advice that's sort of more precise. So just the questions that process asks is educating the client about the things that are relevant and perhaps the things that are not.
And that ties into the next point, which is how legal tech prepares lawyers and clients for that initial meeting. And we have answered that topic quite thoroughly, I think. But when a client, for instance, what you were saying, Karen, when a client does come through Wilson Estates, we have and I've mentioned in this in the beginning, but a food for thought section, which is kind of like homework for the client.
Yeah.
So the things that the client, has to think about that they haven't answered is really, really beneficial, just things about, who they actually want as their substitute attorneys or substitute executors, things like that they would never have heard of. But also, if the matter is complex, the system will take them down that pathway. So for instance, if there's self-managed super funds, if there are trust deeds, the system will
tell them this is the information you need to collect and bring with you for further advice. And it may be, and this is the point, I think, it again come back to that chicken and the egg situation. Sometimes the client can't move beyond whatever the thing, let's say it's the guardian for their infant children. They can't move beyond that until they've had some advice for you. They can do all the thinking about it in the world, but nevertheless, what they require is some input from a lawyer, or whether it be a technical legal question with a technical legal answer, or whether it just be, look, in your experience, what have you seen is useful in this person who's going to fulfill this role. it might be that, and it might be they need that before they can then give you the instructions that they need to, or it might be I'm just missing a piece of information. And once we have that information, everything will, there'll be an easy answer. It really depends on what the issue is, but that's the best part of that process. It's really designed to allow what the lawyer does best, which is give advice, to shine, and to take the distracting part of what the lawyer has to do sometimes, which is this series of random questions, and really tries to keep that down to a dull roar, so that when you're sitting in front of a client, you are talking to them about the stuff that that whatever their burning issue is, you're able to do that in a way that then they can go on and give instructions to you to complete either an item of work. It might be a will, it might be an enduring power of attorney, or it might be the next step in their family law matter.
Yeah. And Andrew, that was a great description, Karen, especially in the wills and estates area, but in family law, just for preparing clients and lawyers as well. Now, when clients do come through the family law system, the lawyer ends up with a very detailed brief on everything about the client, including contributions, so on and so forth, an assets and liability schedule, a chronology, as well as a balance sheet. And all of that is pre-populated, so you don't have to manually do that yourself. Andrew, do you find that when you have that information specifically, you feel a lot more prepared?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a situation where, you can see the figures in black and white and look at various issues. And you might find part of, as you're going through the chronology, oh, hang on a second, we've got a limitation date coming up here. I've got to provide some specific advice about that, because if we don't, we're snookered. There might also be other issues that from the chronology you can then use to ask various questions, and might also lead you to then say, look, I need something further from you, or I need to get a clearer picture of this. Can I have an authority to talk to your accountant or your financial planner or someone like that? Because even though we can get a mud map, if you've got a non-financial spouse who says, look, I don't know anything about that, my wife used to do all of this, you're behind the eight ball. So sometimes you might need to go, okay, that's an area that you don't have a lot of knowledge about, for us to give you proper advice or to work out whether there are various issues. I can remember there was a situation once where a husband said to me, oh yeah, we've been living in the property that the super fund owns. And of course, all of a sudden, alarm bells start going off in my head. So I'm going, okay, better get some information from the accountant. And actually what ended up being the situation was that it was a property that they rented from the super fund at market rate and all of this sort of stuff, because they were in the process of building a house and the only place that they could really live was in one of the properties. So the accountant had said, no, this is what we've got to do to make this all above board and for the minimum period of time. So that then allowed me to go, okay, we don't have in-house asset rule compliance issues here. So it allows you to get that information from the people that can give you the bigger picture, because some people may just not have that information. They're not the financial spouse. They've never really taken a lot of interest in certain things. They don't know what shares they bought 25 years ago when they had an inheritance from great granny. That's all just, well, the stockbroker takes care of that. Okay, right, fantastic. You need to get me a copy of your portfolio.
Yeah. No, that's a great description. So I think I'm just a bit wary of the time. Is there anything else, Karen and Andrew, you wanted to add in terms of legal tech being able to personalise the law, or do you think we've covered what we need to cover? Feel free to add anything if you want, and then we'll go into questions if there are any.
I think we've really covered off on all of it. I suppose the biggest thing that that I would say, and I think is the main takeaway from this, is Settify is, or the process of having some sort of an induction that gathers this information before you actually physically see a client, physically or virtually see a client, is that number one, it's an addition to what you do. It doesn't replace what you do, and it enables you to shine in terms of the assistance you can provide to a client. And I think if whatever process you use for that ticks all those boxes, well, that's the job done. And I think that, you know, I don't currently use it because I now have a different career. But previously, for a number of years, used that in a number of spaces, and Settify has always done that for us and for our clients in those particular spaces. So doesn't have to be Settify, but it's easy. It's really easy.
No, thank you, Karen. And that's perfect what you've just how you've just described Settify, because you're absolutely right. We're not trying to take away anything from the relationship you build with your client. We're trying to make it better from the get-go. And that's kind of how Settify all came about, really. So thank you so much, Karen. Andrew, is there anything else you want to add as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've obviously had to cope with over at least the last 2 years is that you might have a plan to do something, and then all of a sudden that plan goes out the window 15 minutes after you put it in place. So one of the things that can happen with us is that we might get called to court urgently. Sorry, and we need to be able to rearrange things, have someone else sit in and do an appointment for us if we have to go to court or we get delayed at court. And it also allows our clients to go, well, okay, I can't see that particular solicitor today, so someone else is going to help me. But, you know, they might also have things that change for themselves. All of a sudden, everything might go to hell in a handcart, and that appointment that they had booked in has now been overtaken by having to pick up a child from school because they're sick, or some change in work arrangements. So the ability to use tech in the legal space is really giving people more of an option, and being able to tailor that option to their circumstances rather than fitting into whatever the established system might well be.
Another wonderful description of what Settify can do. So it doesn't look like there are any questions, unless
there are a few questions. Yes.
Oh, great, Karen.
So the first question is, what's the connection between us and Settify? For myself, absolutely none. I used to have a role where the firm that I was at, and I was a partner at, used Settify in its family law and its wills and estates space. It was a service that we paid for in the ordinary course. There were no deals, if I can use that term. And I'm now a barrister, so I don't have any interface with Settify at all whatsoever. So Andrew works at that sounds dreadful. Andrew works at the firm where I came from before I was at the bar, and again, as I said, that firm uses and pays for Settify in the ordinary course. The second question is, what areas of law are covered by Settify, and can it be modified to cater for other areas, for example, litigation? Yeah. Might leave that to a Settify person to answer, except that I do know that there's a new estate litigation module. I haven't seen that. I presume it's great, but I can't comment. And I don't know, ComLit might be something that you're thinking about. I don't know.
So the areas of law covered by Settify, we know that it's family law, wills and estates. We also have the probate platform, and we also have estate disputes. And with estate disputes as well, that's our most recent baby. And Andrew, you were talking about a chronology in family law, just like the family law system, estate disputes actually does produce a chronology as well, which is, I've never worked in estate disputes, but from what the feedback I get from partner firms is the chronology for estate disputes is really, really useful. But the estate dispute system also sends out an email containing the limitation date. So you just actually add that to your calendar, because apparently lawyers lose sleep over this. So you can, so
partners who manage lawyers lose sleep over this.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's the really cool thing about estate disputes as well. But with estate disputes, the feedback we're also getting is for initial meetings when clients do come in, it's really a therapy session. But when they've adopted Settify, there's no beating around the bush. They actually just get straight to the point. And there's also relationship sliders in the system as well. So you know if a person has been estranged, you know what their financial circumstances are as well as their health circumstances, which are all things you need to know for that matter. But estate disputes matters are obviously a lucrative area of law. And what Settify offers is we add website buttons to your website, and it will say, do you want to start your estate dispute matter? And it covers things like will validity, provision claims, you name it. And then you can get that lead come through. So it's also, a lead generation system as well. But the cool thing about probate is there's an upload document function. So clients can upload things like the death certificate. If there is a will in place, they can upload the will as well. If it's not probate, so there's no will, it'll go down the pathway of letters of administration. So we do cater for those areas of law, always looking into other areas as well. But those are our main areas of law. Also on that point, I don't know if this kind of ties into this question, but we do have the systems, like those areas of law, but those systems also integrate with practice management systems as well. So for example, with LEAP, if a client comes through family law or wills and estates, that information will get put into LEAP. So you're not actually manually putting that information in. It saves 20 minutes per matter. We have all sorts of integrations with all sorts of practice management systems, which is also a really nice feature as well. But what we're looking at is automation. So you spend the time doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is, as Karen said, shine. I really like that term. So does that answer? Hopefully that answers the questions. Are there any other questions at all?
One of the things too that you can look at too is that if, for instance, you're currently working in one area, but you want to expand your practice, when I worked at Best Wilson Buckley, we didn't do estate planning, and we then later on took on someone. So we bolted on the Wilson Estates Settify package to our existing family law package, and that then allowed us to make sure that the correct information went to our Wills and Estates practitioner.
Yeah.
And those two subject areas do tend to relate. So if you're doing family law, you probably are going to do at least, I use the term straightforward, estate planning, even if that's not something that's part of your subject area, because you think it's really important for your client and you want to make sure they have it done. It's probably less likely to work in reverse, but those kinds of people tend to work together in any event. So very useful.
And quickly on that point, I know we've got about 2 minutes left. With the family law and wills and estate systems, there is a bridging pathway. So for family law clients that do come through the system, they can actually start their will. So once they finish the family law system, we then ask them, have you thought about who's going to inherit your assets? So it's just a really nice introduction to getting their will and EPA and EPG done as well. But as family lawyers, we need to encourage our clients to get wills. So it just makes your life easier as well. So very good point on that. Michael Brown, you asked the question about LEAP, but I believe Rachel is sending you an email, so that's completely fine. And we absolutely do integrate with LEAP, which that email should cover as well. Are there any other quick questions? We've got 1 minute. No. Okay, wonderful. Well, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Karen and Andrew. You have actually been so much fun. So thank you.
I'm surprised.
It's never a dull moment when we're together at times.
I know. But very insightful and obviously very knowledgeable in your areas. So thank you so much for joining us at Settify Sessions. I believe you have another seminar or webinar you are hosting. Is that correct?
Yes, for our sin.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Different topic.
Okay. Good luck. You both are amazing, and thank you so much.
Pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining. Have a wonderful day.